I'm Ilise Levine, Sales and Marketing Director for Shadow Mountain Publishing, and in this video I'll be presenting new books for spring 2023 and some recent highlights. Brandon Mull is the best-selling author of the Fablehaven and Dragonwatch series. In March, we'll publish Carnival Quest, the long-awaited series finale to the Candy Shop War, where magical candies give kids superpowers to fight a family of evil magicians. So liquid licorice, for example, lets the eater change their body anywhere on the spectrum between solid and liquid, so you can stretch and fit through any opening that water could get through. There's a lot of whimsy in this series, as you'd expect from Brandon Mull, and since it takes place in a carnival, there's also a lot of scary elements, with a particular emphasis on creepy clowns. Coming in August is the first ever official Fablehaven cookbook, wondrous recipes inspired by the characters from the series. Each recipe includes a brief description on how it relates to the Fablehaven story. All the essential ingredients to make every recipe in this cookbook is located in the front of the book in a section called Caretaker's Pantry, and it will feature an original short story by Brandon Mull. New from J. Scott Savage is the debut of the series Grayson Fox, School Treasure Hunter. He's a fedora-wearing fifth-grade adventurer in the spirit of Indiana Jones, who navigates a maze of old textbooks, battles menacing school rats, climbs a mountain of discarded desks in order to find a long-lost chest of toys which were confiscated in school over a period of many decades. And as such, there are many retro references to past decades of school treasures, like Pokemon, rare comic books, Rubik's Cubes, and old-school gadgets that amused bored students in yesteryear. J. Scott Savage is also the author of the Lost Wonderland Diaries. It's about two kids who find the lost diaries of Lewis Carroll in their local library, and that opens a portal back to Wonderland, where all the familiar characters like Humpty Dumpty and Tweedledee and Tweedledum are now monstrous. New from McCall Hoyle, the author of Stella, which is currently nominated for 8 state awards, is a new title focusing on a dog friend of Stella's in a book called Just Gus. Gus was rescued after being abused as a puppy and trained as a livestock working dog, protecting his sheep and chickens from predators like fox and coyotes. One day, Gus confronts a bear, and in fearlessly protecting his flock, injures his leg, making it impossible to continue his important work. He is placed with a family and meets Diego, who struggles with social anxiety, which limits his ability to speak, and so he has to attend school online. Gus realizes Diego needs a friend as much as his sheep needed a protector. But in order to stay with his new family and succeed in his new job, Gus has to learn to control his instincts, like barking and patrolling the neighborhood. This is a young reader's adaptation of The Paper Daughters of Chinatown, rewritten and with a new co-author to be age-appropriate in content and to provide historical context for middle grade. It's based on the true story of Chinese girls and young women who were tricked into coming to America in the late 19th century, who landed in San Francisco under false identities and papers and were compelled to face lives of brutal servitude by unscrupulous Chinese gangs. It was up to a group of local women who were dedicated to physically freeing these paper daughters and help them heal the emotional scars of their ordeal, as well as fighting for years in the courts to give them legal status in America when the authorities mostly turned a blind eye. This adaptation follows the story of Tae Choi, who at age 6 is being sent on a boat, she believes, to visit her grandmother, but her impoverished father has sold her. Alone and afraid, she realizes she is headed to San Francisco and is forced to go by the new name listed on her paper documents, Tien Fu Wu, to start her hard new life as a servant in a gambling den. The story mostly takes place when Tien is age 12, as she perseveres through her ordeal until she meets Dolly Cameron, with whom she forges a powerful friendship and the hope of a chance for freedom, and eventually finding a new purpose in helping thousands of immigrant women and girls from China regain their lives and assert their long-denied legal and human rights. These two recently published Young Readers editions by author Cameron Wright are both based on true stories and both have locations in Southeast Asia. The Orphan Keeper is the story of a boy in India who is kidnapped off the streets and sold to an orphanage eventually being adopted by an unsuspecting American family who don't know his family is still alive. He grows up in America and thrives, and due to a series of incredible coincidences, he gets additional clues to his past which lead him back to India in search of his birth mother. This edition includes a Dear Young Reader letter from the man whose life this book is based, Taj Roland. The Rent Collector is about a woman who scratches out basic subsistence by finding recyclables and things which could be repaired and sold from a garbage dump where she lives in Cambodia. In the book, it says all her possessions could be held in her two hands. She is taught to read by a woman who is the rent collector and begins to realize the world is so much bigger than the dump, and as the women read together, they begin to understand each other, showing the power of literacy to empower and connect people. These are two new middle grade titles from the writing team behind the best-selling and state award-winning titles Mustaches for Maddie and Squint, Chad Morris and Shelley Brown. Virtually Me takes place in a post-pandemic world where kids who would have social challenges in in-person school opt for a new virtual reality academy, thinking this is an answer to their prayers. Avatars represent them in this 3D virtual reality environment, so they go to class and they mingle in hallways, and the book follows several students who each have a different reason to want to avoid in-person school, and we explore through their eyes whether they can, in fact, get a fresh start and avoid the conflicts that made in-person school such a struggle. Coming in August of 2023, The Wild Journey of Juniper Berry is a middle grade fish out of water tale about a nature-loving girl raised off the grid in a cabin in the woods who relocates to the city when her brother needs medical care. To help pay the family's medical bills so they can move back home, Juniper starts posting videos filled with things she's learned from observing animals in nature. Kids at school start to share these videos to make fun of her, but the posts go viral as viewers appreciate her wisdom and begin to see the world from a fresh perspective. This is a look at some recent empathy-building titles. Let me highlight Trusting True North, which takes place during a pandemic. As True reasons with all the adults so distracted by the virus, she must figure out how to resolve all her problems herself as they unfold right along with the public health crisis. The Legend of the Dream Giants is told in text and graphic novel-style illustrations, and is the story of Berg, a lonely and misunderstood orphan giant whose mother comes to him in dreams to comfort and to guide him. New this spring is a picture book about how a father's love for his daughter is joyfully expressed during their nightly routine when he braids her hair and shares imaginative and empowering bedtime stories in Only a Trintha Away. In one story, Shia's braid becomes a sturdy, twisted vine that she uses to bravely swing through a jungle. In another, her braids are jump ropes as she catches the beat to play double dutch with the best players in the neighborhood. This book was written by Nadine Fonseca, who is the founder of Mighty Kind, an educational multimedia company for families that aims to use teaching kindness as a bridge to anti-racist learning. It features an author's note sharing the history of braids in Latinx culture as a way to facilitate social connection and show cultural and artistic expression. Moving on to young adult. Journal entry. Headed to school. I know what everyone will say. There goes the girl who tried to kill herself. This is the premise of Swimming in a Sea of Stars, a novel about teen mental health issues, particularly teens struggling with depression and suicidal ideation, with an emphasis on how healing and hope can come from small acts of kindness, and as such, every person can matter. The author, Julie Wright, has written several proper romances for us, such as Lies Jane Austen Told Me, and in that genre, as well as this YA, she's incredibly adept in helping us understand the elements of why certain people find connection in each other. Coming in May is Beauty Reborn, which is a retelling of Beauty and the Beast, about healing from the trauma of emotional and sexual abuse through the lens of a well-known fairy tale. The story implies sexual abuse, but the incident is not explicitly described, and the story explores the difficulty in learning to trust again, as well as noting that the road to empowerment is an ongoing journey, not a simple happily ever after ending. The author, Elizabeth Loham, draws from her own experience as a sexual abuse survivor and identifies in the story the red flags associated with manipulative and/or abusive relationships. New in historical fiction, Under the Cover of Mercy, is one of the few books available about the incredible story of Edith Cavell, who was a British nurse during World War I and a pioneer in modern nursing care, who helped hundreds of Allied soldiers escape from German-occupied Belgium once they came into her care after being wounded. Cavell was arrested, court-martialed, and executed by firing squad, and her death became a rallying cry used by the Allies to gain support for the war effort against the brutality of the Germans. If you Google her name in World War I propaganda, you'll see recruitment posters, which were very effective in getting more men to join the fight. The story is told from the point of view of Edith Cavell and her friend and a fellow nurse. Coming in June is Along a Breton Shore, which is another French Revolution setting novel by Arlem Hawks, who published Beyond the Lavender Fields with us earlier this year. Booklist recommended that book as refreshingly different, with a perfectly evoked setting. This is a standalone with some characters from the previous book, and is set during the Reign of Terror, when Robespierre, the leader of the revolutionaries, is killed, and Maxence and Armel are in hiding in France as it descends into chaos and ashes. Here's a quick look at two recent titles in historical fiction with strong female protagonists. The Opera Sisters is based on the real story of the Cook sisters, who smuggled valuables out of Nazi Germany to finance a daring operation to save Jews in the closing days before the start of war. Viewed as looking more middle-aged than their youthful 30s, the women are able to pass through SS checkpoints at the border by guards who write them off as eccentric and innocuous characters, which they use to their advantage to divert any suspicion as they exit Germany, dripping in jewels which they did not possess when they entered the country. In the Shadow of a Queen is written by the author of The Paper Daughters of Chinatown, and is the story of the progressive, strong-willed daughter of Queen Victoria, Princess Louise, who lived under the thumb of her mother's rigid rules. But as she matured, Louise was able to chart her own course in life and became an established sculptor, championed causes for women's rights, and was the first royal since the Tudors to marry outside of royalty, all against the wishes of her mother, who was determined to avoid scandal at any cost. 2040 60-Minute Dinners is a new cookbook coming in April. It's organized by time-available scenarios, so if you only have 20 minutes, you can dip in and see quick recipes for things like mac and cheese with candied sausage. But maybe you can squeeze a little more time for dinner prep, and then you can create Thai-style noodles with sticky rice and peanut sauce, which is the recipe you see on the slide. You can also see that the recipe, ingredients, and steps are put in a grid format, which is much easier and a more visual way to follow instructions. Each recipe also has a gluten-free variation note to tell you if the recipe is naturally gluten-free or if some substitutions can be made to make it so. And a reminder that our new fall cookbook by Tara Teaspoon, Delicious Gatherings, has a very relatable premise. If it's been a while since you've cooked for a get-together, this collection will help ease you back into hosting and includes everything from intimate brunches to elaborate buffets to sit-down dinners. Tara is a former food stylist and former food editor at Ladies' Home Journal, so the recipes use common ingredients, and as you can see from the photos, they are gorgeous to look at. You may know author Jason F. Wright from Christmas Jars, which was a New York Times best-selling title which has sold more than 500,000 copies, and it's a bit of a cultural phenomenon because of its message about the bonds of community. In March, we'll publish Rise Today under our Christian imprint Ensign Peak. This book is like an extended greeting card of comfort, support, and courage to remind those who are struggling that they are not alone in their trials. Even the Dog Knows is a recent title by this author, which follows the breakup of a marriage as it runs parallel to the younger love story of the couple's grandson and his lost love. This book shows that at every stage of a relationship, there are ups and downs that often require heartbreaking forgiveness. The title comes from the couple's dog, whose point of view is sprinkled throughout the story. He doesn't have a plan to help his humans, but he knows they need each other, and is driven by love and loyalty to them. His observations are empathetic, insightful, and humorous. And finally, proper romance. These heroines are not damsels in distress awaiting rescue. They are women who have had the rug pulled out from under them. Some have emotional upheaval, some have physical challenges like alopecia, others marry men who have issues not well understood in their day, like autism and paralysis. Their journey is first the search for self-acceptance and then the search for true and unconditional love. Our proper romance titles are clean content, so they are suitable for all ages. These are not bonnet romances, there's no inspirational content at all. There's all the longing, passion, and desire you'd want in romance, but there's no onstage sex. In March, we'll return to Western romance with Sarah M. Eden's Wyoming Wild, when a sheriff's daughter asks a hardened U.S. Marshal to join her fight for justice and rid a small town of her corrupt father. Coming in May, A Heart Worth Stealing is a Regency romance about an independent woman who hires a private eye to help her track down a thief of her late father's pocket watch when the local authorities prove incompetent, and she discovers a more frightening plot against her. And in August, The Art of Love and Lies is a Victorian romance about a free-spirited artist who is an expert in reproducing parlor versions of classic masterpieces. She teams up with a no-nonsense detective when she sees her own reproduction painting on display at an art exhibition after someone stole the original, and the evidence casts suspicion on her. Ebook review copies are available on Edelweiss and NetGalley, and on Edelweiss you'll always find more available backlist titles than NetGalley. Our titles are sold as ebooks on all popular platforms. Thank you, and feel free to reach out to me directly for any product information you may need at ilevine@shadowmountain.com.